Hello and welcome to our backoff webinar. My name is Pascal Dresselhaus. I'm product manager of TwinCAT, and our today's topic is the database connectivity easily established with TwinCAT. So feel free to use during the webinar the possibility to ask questions. So therefore is the question functionality in the GoToWebinar software. We try to answer all these questions after the next 30 minutes. The main focus by this webinar is on TwinCAT Database Server. This TwinCAT Database Server is a 10 years old product, but we made a complete redesign, and this redesign is released in this week. And so we are very happy and proud to present you today in this webinar all the new features what we have done during the last development year. And also I can say to you that we will have more than this webinar during this year. We will have a lot of different webinars to the database server, so also with focus on programming, for example. Today is more the focus on configuration and general features. Therefore, I prepared this presentation here with a short introduction, with the functional concept of the database server. We will take a look to the configurator side, of course, together with a short live demonstration. Then we will talk about the PLC library and the supported databases. And finally, of course, you will get an outlook about this product. Let us start with the introduction. Of course, data is important. You will have data what you can store in databases for machines, for wind turbines, for buildings. It is more and more important to do that because data is maybe the gold of our century now, and we can store a lot of data in these different branches. Product data, we can have the link between production and consumer or customer data. We can have production receipt handling, so very easy things. Also this I can realize in a database, up to very complex data constructs like condition monitoring data, so raw data with high sampling rates, or calculated data, so condition monitoring results which I can store in a database. All this is possible with databases in a local machine, also cloud-based. And our answer that you, so our customer, can realize his applications, our answer is a TwinCAT database server. And this TwinCAT database server we will see now here at first in the functional concept. So the functional concept is that we have a configurator part for the TwinCAT database server. Here I can configure all the database connections, and then I can generate the configuration file. It is an XML-based configuration file. And then I can read on the runtime system this configuration file with our TwinCAT database server. This is an TwinCAT service, so it is started with TwinCAT automatically. And then I can realize the connection finally to the database. And we will do that within 3 different modes. So this is configure, expert PLC mode, and expert SQL mode. So the configure mode is completely without programming, pure configuration, very easy to use, the focus of our webinar today. And then we have the PLC expert mode, where we have different function blocks for the PLC, and these function blocks realize the database communication, in this case without any necessary knowledge about the SQL commands. And then we have the SQL expert mode. Here we can generate the SQL commands directly in the PLC program and can transfer it by our database server to the database. So that is a high performance way of communication. Then we have different network topologies. Of course, I will not describe here each topology, but maybe the most important topology is that the database server is installed on each control system. That is often the reason, because it gives limitations from IT departments of end customers, for example, with that the TwinCAT software, so the control software, should be not installed on an database server in the network. And so the most important topology is to install the database server directly on the control system to realize then over the network the connection of the control system to the database. But also all other topologies are possible. So depends always on the application, what is the best choice here of the different possibilities. Finally, we are on a PC-based controller, so we can install our TwinCAT and or database server on all these different devices, so it is very flexible. Then we come to the configurator, integrated with the TwinCAT Database Server configurator and now in the Microsoft Visual Studio. So this comes together with our complete redesign. And the most important point for this is that we have the strategy to have just one engineering tool, and this is integrated in the Microsoft Visual Studio. You can see that very nice here in the following screenshot. So you have in a Visual Studio solution, you have not only the TwinCAT project and not only the TwinCAT measurement project with our TwinCAT scope view, so with our charting tool. Now you have also integrated the TwinCAT connectivity project, and the TwinCAT connectivity project we will integrate step by step all the different configurators for connectivity products like OPC UA configurator, IoT configurator. But of course, we are very proud that we from the TwinCAT Database Server team are the first division which is integrated here in the connectivity project. So it is an individual project which can exist parallel to the other projects, but of course we can use synergies between the different products, and this is what I would like to show you later in my live demonstration, because then you will see that very easily that it is a big advantage to use all the same things in different products. So this is from the engineering point of view much more easier as to have it always individual. If we set up such a project, then we have at first here the server settings. It is realized in two ways. So for the guys who knows the TwinCAT database server for several years, we designed it in an editor window here. This is similar to the standalone configurator what we provide before with the TwinCAT database server, but also for the Visual Studio freaks, we have integrated all the settings in the properties. So in the property windows you can do the same settings as in the editor, for example. And maybe you know from the old version that we have a lot of different registry entries. All these entries are moved now to the server settings page here, so it is much more easier from the engineering point of view. Then we like to configure a database connection. Then we can add here in the solution tree the database, and then I'm able to choose my favorite database, and then I can set up all the settings of this database here. I can also create databases from here, so that is a very big difference to the old database server. In the old database server you have to know the database and a table of the database. Here today it is just necessary to provide a database. This database is existing or not existing. If not, then you can create a directive from here, and a table is not necessary in general anymore. So all the other things, what I show you later, can detect the different tables automatically on the configured database. So much more easier also in this point. Very often question was in the past, new project, same database. Yes, that is often, especially in big machines where you have more than one controller. So for example, you have 5 or 6 controllers, and all these controllers should write data to a database, to one central database. And then you like to have separate solutions with TwinCAT projects, for example, and connectivity projects for each controller. But then you need for each connectivity project the same database configuration. Therefore, we developed the so-called database pool, and there you can store all the different database configurations, and these configurations you can take by drag and drop to the database server project, and then you have automatically all the settings. So the engineering also here by a startup of a machine, for example, will be much more easier now. Then you can go farther on with a quick test of the database communication in the so-called SQL Query Editor. This is a perfect testing tool for select command, for insert command, for delete, create table, or also for stored procedures, what you can test here directly from the configuration tool. Therefore, we can read out automatically the tables, how I said before. It is just necessary to have the database connection. And then you see here the command, for example, here in this case for select. This you see directly in clear text. And then you see here also the table structure, and you can set values for an insert, and you can see how many entries are there with the select command. And the most important point is that you can choose here in this drop-down box on which target this should work. So if you have a controller in the field, for example, where the database server is installed, then you can try to use this database server from the configurator engineering system, for example, right? And so you try the connectivity between the real database server in the field and the real database. So this is nothing special from the configuration tool. It works really with the real database server, and everything what is working here will later on working also from the control system, from the PLC, for example. Of course, also in the engineering, we supporting here as good as we can. So you have here the automatic mapping from the database data types to the PLC data types. And to use this mapping directly, you can generate an export of this structure as a PLC structure, and then you can insert it into your PLC project to work with this structure. And it is also possible the commands, what you can see here, in this case again a select command, this you can convert in PLC syntax, and then you can copy this here by these buttons to your PLC project, and then you can try it from there. So very nice, this tool to test the complete communication with the real database server in the field. And now, how I said, the focus today is more on configuration side, and now I will move to the so-called configure mode. And this configure mode is working with so-called autolog groups. Autolog groups is a group of symbols which are logged to a database, cyclically on change or whatever you want. And this will work completely without programming. So it is very fast to configure, and this is what I like to show you now. And therefore I will move now to the Microsoft Visual Studio. So here's the Microsoft Visual Studio. Here a TwinCAT project is still open. It is a project, it is from the building automation, so home automation. You can take a look here. So I have a main program and then some rooms, and I will finally show you only how to write temperature values to a database. And therefore we have to set up now a connectivity project here, and therefore I go to the context menus. I said add new project. Then I can choose here in the TwinCAT connectivity part, I can choose an empty connectivity project, or I can use a template for the TwinCAT Database Server. I will choose this, of course. Then it is add here to my solution. Then I see here all the different settings in the editor, also here in the properties. But of course we can use here now the standard values. This is not the focus here, so we can add directly a new database. So context menu, add new database, and then I can choose here in the editor a database, for example here in Microsoft SQL Server. This is what I have run on my local system here, and I like to show how it is working with this database. Now I can set up all the different settings, but I'm not the youngest, so I can't remember in all these settings on my local system. Therefore I can go now to the database pool, and then I can choose one of my existing configurations here. Therefore I can also delete the new database here. Delete, yes, okay. And then I take here my DB, and this configuration fits to my local system here. And then I have here a database, it's called MyDB. This is still existing, this MyDB, and there I can provide now also a new one, maybe Webinar DB, for example. Of course this is not existing, but therefore I can take here this button, create button, and then I get a message here, create database Webinar DB is succeeded. You can have this here with a pop-up, or you can have it here just in the taskbar here, and so you have always a hint if the action was succeeded or not. In this case it was succeeded, so we have now a database. This we can directly activate here with the activate configuration button in the toolbar. So now he said also again here it is activated. And then we can move to the SQL query editor. In this SQL query editor we can choose here the database. Of course it is just one configured, and then we can choose here the table. Of course we have no table because this is a complete new database, so it is not existing. There are not existing any tables, so we can go to create table, and then we can create or own a new tables for this database. It gives meanwhile two different possibilities. Maybe some older database user knows that we have this standard table structure. This standard table structure, we use this structure always for this easy configuration if we have no function blocks, so just configuration, then we were always using this standard structure. In the new database server, it is possible now to use this configure mode also with very flexible and open table structures. And this is possible to design here, so I can add here new columns, for example. and this totally individual. But of course, if you know this standard table structure and you like it, then we prepared this for you. So you can make a right click to the context menu, create standard table struct, and then it is completely automatically generated here. And then you can directly execute this table, and then the database server asks you for the table name. In this case, I will show you finally the difference between standard table structure and a customized table structure, and this both in the case of temperature measurement. So I call it table standard temp, for example, and then he said yes, it is succeeded to generate this table. So this table is now existing on the new database. And then I can, of course, I can clear here everything and can do my own configuration from scratch. But I can also take this standard table structure to modify this. For example, here for different temperatures. So I have now different columns. Maybe in the automation, home automation project, we will choose the temperature for the bathroom, for example, bath temp. Then for the living room, so livy temp, and for the dining room, so dining temp. And then we can set up the data type. So yeah, in this case, that are the same data types, so it's always float. So then I can choose this as float value. And so I have a complete individual table. So it is not yeah, the structure that I have just a name per line for one value, so not a line or yeah, a line per value. In this case, I have in one line 3 values: the value for the bath temperature, for the living room temperature, and for the dining room temperature. This I can execute now. I call this custom temp, and then you will see later really the difference between these two table types. But you see, it is very easy to set up this, and then we can go now to choose the different symbols. Therefore, we have to add the so-called autolog groups. So I go to the context menu, say add new autolog group. And then I can rename, of course, these different autolog groups. I give here the same name as the table has. So it is standard temp. And then I can set up some general settings here. So how to start up this group, manual from the configurator, for example, or auto start. This means that this group will start up the logging directly with a TwinCAT boot project, for example. In our case, we make manual now. And then you can have different write modes, for example. So ring buffer, update, append, we make append. Then we have log mode, cyclic, update, and so on. Cycle time, always important. The default value is 500 milliseconds. I will set up this now to 5000 milliseconds, so we have 5 seconds later on. Then we can go to the ADS device, for example. The ADS device means only the source of the data. So database server and the symbols what we like to write or read in the database can come from another system, and here I can set up this. So I can choose such a system here by the different targets what I have connected to my engineering system. So this is possible, but here for this webinar I have everything on my local system. So the PLC is running on a local system, the database server is running on the local system, and also the Microsoft SQL Server is running here on my system. Then we can choose the symbols, and to choose the symbols we go to the so-called TwinCAT target browser. Maybe you know the TwinCAT target browser from the TwinCAT scope view, from our charting tool. This is, from my point of view, one of the biggest advantages, that we reuse existing software. So you know it maybe several years now from the scope view and from the measurement project, and now you can use the same tool window also for your database configuration. I can go here in my local system to the PLC port, and then, for example, to the bathroom, and I can choose here the temperature, the dining room temperature, and also the living room temperature here. And then I have these three symbols now. Then I can go to the table, and I can choose one of the tables. I can choose the table mode, standard or custom. In this case I will choose the standard table structure, so I choose standard. And then I can choose one of the tables. If I choose the wrong table, like custom, then he said directly, hey, warning, this is not the right table. Please choose another table, and then I can move again to the standard table, and then he said, hey, everything is okay, it's fine. Here you see again this structure, and you see we have here in the column name we have the allocation name, and this is finally the variable name. And as you you remember, we have here always this R temperature in each room, and therefore we have to change now to make a difference between living room and dining room and bathroom. We have to change now this display name, and this we can do directly, very easy here in the symbols. Therefore we can mark all these symbols, right click, edit symbols, and then I can choose the different symbols, and I can rename the display name here. So here in this case it is the bath temperature, then we have here the dining temperature and the living temperature. You see here also in live in the configurator in the symbols that this name is changed, and so we can later on we can make a difference between the different temperature values. So this is now much more easier, so it's very clear structured here in this point. Then of course we need our second autolog group. I will add one more. I will rename this again. This is now our custom temperature table, and I will choose all the default values. I can go directly to the symbols, and then I choose the same symbols again here from living room, dining room, and from the bathroom. And then I choose another table or customized table, go to custom, then custom temperature table, and then I have here the table structure, and then I can choose now the variables who fits the data type. So here in this case, of course, everything is a double, it's a floating point, and then I can choose here for bath temperature, for living room temperature, and for dining room temperature. And so you see, this is different to the other table. Here I have for each value one column in one line. So that is a big difference now. Now I can activate again my configuration. So activate configuration button again. So it was succeeded, perfect. And then we can move to the AutoLog group view, and then we can log in. Then we see the two different AutoLog groups, and then we can start writing the values. So then we have here this cycle counter, and you see it is also in it is a different velocity here, because here the first one we set up that we will log the values each 5 seconds. Here this is running with 500 milliseconds. And then if you click on one of these groups, you see also the symbols which are in the group. And if you have errors, for example, in the communication, then we will give you here some hints about this error, but also down to the single symbol if necessary. So if in one symbol is an error, then we will also mark this here. So it's perfect for the engineering to find misconfiguration very fast, so it saves a lot of time here. And yeah, the communication is working, so we are now writing all the values into our database. And I like to show you that here in the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. So I move to this software. Here I have databases, then I have to make a refresh because we generate a new database. There it is, the webinar DB. And then we can go in here, see the tables. There we have all different tables. And if we take, for example, the custom temperature table and we select the top 1000 rows, then we see here all the different values. Here for each temperature, one column, so bath temperature, living room and dining room temperature. And this is different to the standard table structure. I like to show you that here. Select also the first 1000. And then you see that we have on block for each timestamp 3 rows, and then in each rows with the display name, and then finally the value of this variable finally. So you see, very easy to set up this communication, very easy to set up a communication between TwinCAT and a database. And of course you can control all this communication also from the PLC, and therefore we go back to my presentation. We will talk now about the PLC library. This is a complete new PLC library. It is working with the object-oriented extensions in the PLC standard. So it is especially a TwinCAT 3 library where we are using these methods specially. And so we have function block with different methods. So we have, for example, this AutoLog group function block with special methods to this configure mode, what I showed you now. So we can not only start and stop in the configurator this AutoLog groups, we can also start and stop these groups from the PLC. So you see directly we use also these 3 modes for PLC function blocks. The first mode is the configure mode again. This is also the same for our documentation. We also provide these 3 modes in our documentation that you have easy orientation in the product. Yes, so it depends on what you like to do. Complex from PLC or very easy like I showed you this today, and you can choose your way, and we have special parts for you in the documentation to make it really, really easy for you. In this case, how I said, AutoLog groups can be start and stop. Also run once, for example, is possible to make something like a screenshot from your data, which you can store in the database. but also creating databases, creating tables, and all this stuff is possible from the PLC. So nearly everything what I showed you with the configuration is also possible from the PLC. Then we have the PLC expert mode. How I said here, you can provide a symbol name. So it's especially for classic PLC programmers which are using symbol names to realize communication, for example. You can take this symbol name, put it to an write or read message on different function blocks, and then the SQL command behind will generate it automatically by the TwinCAT Database Server. And if you said, hey, I need much more performance and I'm a SQL expert really, then you can choose the SQL expert mode, and then we have there a lot of different function blocks for you to make exactly this by yourself. So this creating of the SQL command in the PLC, and therefore you can use the FB SQL command, for example, or if you like to start stored procedures from the PLC controller, then you can use the FB SQL stored procedure function block. And yeah, how I said, you set up the commands by yourself, and this is the way with the highest performance, of course, because then the database server can take this command and put it directly to the database. But how I said, also we will have other webinars in this year also for these functionalities. Then we come to supported databases. We have meanwhile a lot of databases what we are supporting. So we have Microsoft SQL Server, how I showed you today. Then we have Microsoft SQL Compact, especially for CE devices. Then we have MySQL or Oracle SQLite, for example, what we are also supporting. Then we have different ODBC databases. Additional to the others, we have IBM DB2, PostgreSQL or Firebird. And then we have some different file-based databases like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Access, but also you can use an ASCII file like a CSV file or an XML file as a database. So it's not so common maybe, but also this is possible with our TwinCAT Database Server. If this is not enough, you have also the possibility to use a common interface, so ODBC or OLEDB, and then you can choose a database what we do not know at the moment from our database server team, or which we are not supporting as a standard database, and then you can install the driver of this database on your control system, and then you need to know how the connection string should be set up, and this setup you can realize in the configurator. You can add some different parameters to provide the values for these parameters, and then you see here the connection string, and then we have also a special parameter for password where we have an encryption here in the connection string, in the configuration, also in the configuration file, for example, and then you can realize the connectivity with the database server from the TwinCAT software to a database what we are not supporting as standard. So very easy to use to set up this if you know what you like to do with other database. This is the preferred way. And then of course we come finally to an outlook to the product. The most important point from my side is always that we have a fixed development team behind the TwinCAT Database Server, so the development goes on. We will have in the future an interface to C++ applications. As you know, we are supporting with TwinCAT 3 not only PLC programming, we are supporting also C++ programming, and we will have an interface from this world, and we will support a lot of other databases, especially regarding the keyword big data. We will have the support of NoSQL databases, and this is where we are working for. Please download the new version. It is available in the web, and yeah, feel free to provide feedback. for the presentation, I say thank you to you, to all of you. And now we can check if we have some different questions. So let me take a look. 1 second.
The first question is what version of TwinCAT 3 XAE, so from our engineering, is necessary, and which Visual Studio versions are supported? So from the TwinCAT point of view, it is the build 4020. So with this TwinCAT build, the new database server is supported. And from the Visual Studio point of view, it is the version 2013 and 2015. So it will not work with 2010, but with 13 and 15, and of course with future versions. And yeah, you know, in the TwinCAT 3 engineering setup, we deliver the version 2013, and it will work directly also with this version. So this fits together. Other questions. Another question is that we have a different tree structure in the configuration now with the new version of the database server. And the question is that the old configuration files, if they are also supported. Of course, they are still supported, so we have, yeah, compatibility is a very important point for us, and here the situation is so that you can use, of course, the old function blocks with the new database server, so old projects should also work with the new database server. Also the old library, the old PLC library, we delivered this old library with a new setup, for example. So you have 2 PLC libraries in the setup meanwhile. So it is the TC2 database compiled library and the TC3 database compiled library. Of course, not working is that you have an old database server somewhere and you like to use the new function blocks. This will not work, of course, but in the opposite way it will working. Then we have further questions. Give me a second. Does a new different does logging data consume time in PLC? Does it necessary my cycle time? So the question is finally that all the logging mechanism interrupt my PLC controller, so my control system. How is the load? Yeah, of course it depends a little bit how many data I like to write or read to the database. But it is like in every PLC implementation, you will see this with exceed counters and so on. So there is that is standard PLC handling. If you don't use the PLC, so you use the autolog groups, how I showed you in the live demonstration, then it is like a normal ADS communication port which is open, so you can compare it with a scope view record, for example. It is just a connection to one of the ADS ports, and therefore from this port we take the data to drop it into the database, and this is finally in the Ring 3. It's this Ring 3 application, the database server, right? So we are then outside from the real-time context, so we have usually no interrupts there. Then we have another question. How is the error handling working is one of the questions. So you have one possibility to see the errors in the configuration tool. So this is a possibility, and we have also a new structure in all our PLC function blocks where you can see error codes in clear text, for example. That's really nice, and yeah, you should try this with our new TC3 database library, where we are working with object-oriented extensions, so a very modern style where you can design modern object-oriented projects, and there we have this error function, this new error functionality or structure. Then it is possible to log oversampling values. Yeah, in general, yes, it's possible as a byte stream, so you can not store each value as clear text, but as a byte stream we can store this data. We have systems where we are running, for example, with 50 channels with each with 10 kilohertz sampling rate, for example. This is possible to store in a Microsoft SQL database, for example. So always depending on the system resources, of course, but in general such an application is possible. Does the SQL query editor, so in the query editor and the configuration tool, support this tool custom SQL commands is one other question. Yes, we support these commands, so it is free to edit there, and then we can use this command with a copy with PLC syntax also from the PLC. So once again, everything what is working at first in the SQL query editor and the configuration tool will later also work in the PLC. So all the different features like create table, create DB connection, and so on, everything is possible also from the PLC, and of course all the different commands as well. In this case, you can use FB SQL command function block, and there is also no restriction. You can give to this function block an insert command, and select command, update, or whatever you want. Yeah, I see no more questions, I think so. Give me a second. No, that it is. Perfect, great. Then we are in the end. Thank you very much for your attention. We will have more webinars for the database server during the year. So we will have the next webinar for programmers, so for the programming solution. So it would be great to see you then again. Thank you so much. Bye bye. All the best.